Historic sites.
What do these places mean to us? They are a living legacy and at the same time history. They are part of what made our nation the United States of America. They are also historic sites where anyone can go and be surrounded by whispers of the past. How do we memorialize such history? How do we ensure the people who lived, breathed, and spoke on such hallowed ground are remembered? How do we make sure these places, which witnessed events that changed the world, don't disappear? We preserve them. The places where the full story of America is told, where visitors can reflect, and where understanding and education can take place. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson signed the National Historic Preservation Act, creating the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Historic places were disappearing, and the legislation was meant to ensure federal agencies act as responsible stewards when their actions affect historic properties. This independent federal agency has had a hand in encouraging the preservation and restoration of many important historic sites. But historic preservation can only tell the whole story of the United States if all Americans are involved. So how could the ACHP make the field of historic preservation more diverse and reflective of our nation's history? In 2017, ACHP expert member and former National Park Service Director Robert Stanton and ACHP Communications Director Susan Glimcher imagined a partnership with historically black colleges and universities and their students, designed to bring students of architecture, construction management, and related fields into historic preservation, where there is a deficit and a stunning lack of diversity.
The current stats in the profession are such that African Americans are still less than 2% of the field of architecture, and architecture students who are African American are less than 7% of the total student population in the nation. And so when we look at the data that doesn't yet exist, if you will, on historic preservation and African American inclusion, there are very few African Americans who are involved in historic preservation as a student, within the profession, or even within the academy.
In partnership with the National Park Service and the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and with support of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities, the ACHP crafted an educational internship called Preservation in Practice. Preservation in Practice began in 2018 with enthusiastic support from the Department of Architecture at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. 6 students traveled to the Western Center for Historic Preservation Training in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming, for 2 weeks. They studied historic preservation theory and learned the skills of preservation at historic structures in the park. During their experience, the students noticed very few people who looked like them.
It's very important for black students to get into the field of historical preservation. With us already underrepresented in the field, it is very important for us to be a catalyst and a spark in the growing field of architecture, especially for not just black but other minorities, to join the field and to bring our personal experiences to help diversify the field of historical preservation.
Back in Baltimore, the students spent 2 weeks doing restoration work with the National Trust Hope Crew at the Peel Center, the original city hall and the first public school in Maryland open to African American students. They visited Washington, D.C. historic sites and networked with preservation leaders.
Working in the Peel Center, we learned that it was one of the first colored schools in Baltimore, and knowing that history and being able to go on tours such as the Frederick Douglass House and things like that, knowing that these figureheads who look like me have done so many amazing things, allows me to, I guess, identify with that and dream big, just like they did.
There's no substitute, in my judgment, with hands-on experience where history actually took place. To see the home where Mr. Douglass actually slept, or to visit the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, where she had her headquarters for the National Council of Negro Women, and knowing that these giants actually lived in that place. And that, I think, is encouraging. In fact, it's very inspiring for the young people to consider the importance of preserving this rich legacy.
In 2019, the ACHP reached out to Tuskegee University in Alabama, where the program was met with enthusiasm by the Department of Architecture and President Lillie McNair. Department head and assistant professor Kwesi Daniels had in fact been working toward incorporating a minor in historic preservation into the School of Architecture. That summer, students from Tuskegee and Morgan spent time at Grand Teton. The majority of them had never been to a national park in the west of the United States, and others had never flown on an airplane. The National Park Service offered them an unparalleled opportunity, not only to learn about historic preservation, but to experience the majesty of the park itself. On campus, they embarked on preservation projects with the National Trust's Hope Crew. Tuskegee students restored windows on a campus building, while Morgan State students restored windows at the campus chapel. When asked about their experiences, the students said the on-campus projects were meaningful because they felt they were becoming part of their school's history.
Working on the windows, because the Tuskegee University was built by students, and so by continuing to build on it and rebuild on it, I feel like it is like I'm contributing to a legacy or something of that nature.
Preservation and Practice alumni have excelled in their programs, gone on to be awarded scholarships to study historic preservation in graduate school, and received internships at the national level.
Network with so many very, very successful people. I'm talking senators, I'm talking CEOs of foundations and things like that. And these people are looking out for me and my future and are reaching out to me with scholarships, with grants, with career opportunities. So that was the biggest thing that has ever happened to me, like in my entire life, because of this program.
All of the students agree that participating in the program helped foster an appreciation for preserving historic places and ensuring their story is told to future generations. For all, standing in these historic places where ordinary people, as well as giants, walked in the past, offered them an opportunity to see how they fit within the rich cultural legacy of African American history in the United States.
Historic preservation was something that I wasn't really privy to beforehand, so having this experience opened up a ton of doors and tremendous opportunities for me to see the value of me being an African American in preservation, and something I didn't even consider before or realize was a thing.
The ACHP is working to keep these exceptional students engaged through career mentoring and support, as well as building a relationship with groups such as the National Organization of Minority Architects, by eventually expanding preservation and practice to all HBCUs that have architecture programs. The ACHP and its partners will help HBCU students build richer, more meaningful careers, being mindful of the essential reasons why historic preservation matters.
The ACHP's mission is to promote the preservation and productive use of our nation's historic resources and advise the President and the Congress on national historic preservation policy. Preservation and practice contributes to that mission and brings more diversity to the field. By giving HBCU architecture students the experience in traditional trades, they will better understand how their field is complemented by historic preservation, and that preserving historic buildings connects them to their history and allows us to tell the full story of America. Bringing students into preservation philosophy, building crafts, technology, and project management skills is critical to the future of preservation. We appreciate this partnership with the National Park Service, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities.